Welcome, everyone. Welcome to Diverse Stories in STEM. I'm Dr. Janelle Ortiz, and I'm so happy to have all of you here and really excited for our speaker today. For all the students in the room, we're going to be circulating a sign-in sheet for your class that you're here for, so make sure you sign in with your name and your course. Sound good? All right. So a little bit about Diverse Stories in STEM. This was really born out of a collaboration between me, Dr. Rachel Blakey in biology, and also Dr. Iman Attaras in animal science. And we really wanted to bring in diverse experts from the fields of STEM to be able to share their experience in the fields, but also to share their story with all of you, our students, as part of the classroom experience. Because originally this was funded through a SPICE grant for instructional innovation in the classroom. And so that was really our opportunity to bring in these experts in STEM to be able to share all of their wonderful stories with you, and so you can learn about their journey in STEM. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Dr. Allison Baskey, who is the Dean of College of Science and also the current interim Dean of the College of Agriculture, to introduce today's speaker.
Hello. There we go. Is this... Yes, sounds like it's working out there. So first, I would like to begin with a land acknowledgement. We first want to acknowledge that we are guests on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Gabrielino, Tongva, and Tataviam people. We pay our respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. The land remains shared space among the Quiche, Serrano, Kawiya, Rumsen, Ohlone, and Louisiano people. We also recognize this land, known as Los Angeles County today, is also home to many indigenous peoples from all over the world. And we are grateful for the opportunity to live and work here as guests on these lands. And next, the most exciting part, as a speaker, I think this is the first one for this semester, hopefully, in our Diverse Stories in STEM. I am Allison Baskey, Dean for the College of Science, and at the moment, interim for agriculture, so I very much look forward to these talks. We are so fortunate to have Miguel Ordeñana here to speak on exploring wildlife of LA's urban core. Miguel Ordeñana is an environmental educator and wildlife biologist. He works at the Natural History Museum of Los Angeles County as a senior manager in the Community Science Office. As a community science senior manager, Miguel promotes and creates community science projects and recruits and trains participants. Miguel utilizes his mammal research background by conducting urban mammal research in LA and leads the museum's Southern California Squirrel Survey and Backyard Bat Survey. He serves as an advisor on a jaguar project in southwestern Nicaragua that he initiated in 2012, as well as serves as a board member for the Friends of Griffith Park and National Wildlife Federation. Miguel is dedicated towards making science and access to nature more equitable, with a goal of increasing the representation and retention of underrepresented communities within the environmental field. He holds a bachelor's degree in environmental studies from USC and an MS in ecology from UC Davis. So let's welcome Miguel Ordeñana to speak about wildlife of LA's urban core.
Thank you. Definitely an honor to be here. Thanks for everybody for coming out today. I know it's a rainy day, but I'm just thrilled to be in this safe space today with everybody, and for the people who created this safe space for me to talk about myself, my career, the work that I do in a very honest way. As you'll notice throughout the talk, an overarching theme, an overarching theme will be my identity and how that kind of weaves into and inspires the work that I do. And a lot of people think about, oh, you have to navigate your identity. It's such a barrier, such an obstacle. And yeah, at first when I was getting into this field, trying to find myself within this career path that I'm on, I did kind of perceive it that way. Now, though, I see it as a superpower, a way for me to stand out, a way for me to be able to empathize better, a way for me to support people that are also trying to pursue the same path. My identity includes being the descendant of some hardworking Nicaraguan immigrants that came to this country not knowing the language, just using their work ethic and family bonds to make it through and make a better life for the next generation, which includes me. Up in the top left corner are the four Miguels, my great-grandfather, grandfather, my dad, and myself. And to the to the bottom right corner is me as a father. That's another part of my identity now, as a father, as a proud husband. And then you see me on the top right, kind of in the field, as a field biologist. That was one chapter in my life that continues, but kind of the traditional kind of biologist kind of field work lifestyle is kind of a little bit behind me now, as far as kind of just dedicating myself to that and working in isolation. The bottom left is me also in nature, which is where I like to be, looking for wildlife, but doing it as part of a community. And that's kind of where my sweet spot is. I kind of think of myself as like a Goldilocks, right? I like the nature, I like the community, but I kind of prefer this middle place where I can do both. And I'm not willing to compromise on either. And in the middle, it's not by accident, my mother and I. My mom basically raised me and taught me the importance of having a strong work ethic, being resilient, and just kind of doing what I want to do and not taking no for an answer. I grew up in Los Angeles, very close to Griffith Park, and that was like my Yosemite, my access to nature. I didn't have the opportunity to go to Yosemite or even the Western Santa Monica Mountains for that matter as a kid. I didn't go to those places till I was an adult. And so this was my access. And my family didn't use it to go bird watching or immerse me in Boy Scouts or anything like that. We went there for a hike, and sometimes I'd be resistant to those hikes. They literally have to lure me up to the top of the hill with Pollo Loco because I was like, why am I doing this? I didn't understand the nature around me. I didn't have that rich experience that I do now in nature by knowing what's around me, having that awareness. And as I got further into the urban core, that connection to nature would decrease all the time. When I would be in the city, further away from the park, more and more, I associated concrete, urbanization, cars as places that were devoid of nature. And so that had an impact, a long-lasting impact that I had to fight through as a kid, especially coming from a background where my family wasn't into the sciences or into nature exploration. And so I had to really kind of find it on my own. Thankfully, animals like this were my connection. Those were my bridges to nature. Coyotes, going out of our apartment complex and then being spooked by a coyote just like that when we would come out of our carport. Or a skunk spraying our dog. Things like that would happen all the time. And that kind of connection that I had to these controversial animals like coyotes, raccoons, skunks that I would see in the neighborhood really gave me this really relatable connection to nature. These are controversial species, just like my family being out in nature. That was controversial for some people, wanting to know more about the sciences and environmental education, and people being surprised by that. Similarly, these animals are similarly voiceless, perceived as threats, and I really gravitated towards that. I saw it as a challenge. And even to the point where that was my focus in graduate school, was focusing on the impacts of urbanization on these cherished urban carnivores that I love so much. And I'm surprised by this, but I got an email. I don't really follow this very often as far as my publication record, but this was published in Journal of Mammalogy about 15 years ago, and it just reached the milestone of 300 citations last week. So I was like, wow, is that I'm just happy that it's having such an impact and helping people kind of immerse themselves into urban research, urban carnivore research. I use tools like camera traps, motion-activated cameras to study these elusive animals as part of that work. That give you a date, time, and location every time you take a photo to give you a sense of how these animals are navigating this landscape in the darkness when we're mostly asleep. And so I took that skill to Nicaragua, which is where my family's from, and learned about not only how to use this equipment in corridors that are being built up or taken over by livestock ranching, but also how to work with communities, the importance of listening. And if you don't do that, that's what you call parachute science. And that's something that I've learned to avoid very early on in my career, because I had people come to our urban community trying to tell us what to do or extract kind of information from us. And I wouldn't want to do that to other people. I don't want to treat people any differently than I'd like to be treated. So that involved kind of engaging with people that were owners of these properties, and also future property owners like these kids that were part of a junior ranger program, and talking to them in a way that was hopefully relatable, engaging, in a vulnerable way, so they can see themselves kind of pursuing the same career, and also being owners of these properties and continuing on with their family's legacy, and not telling them, no, don't do that. Don't honor your culture. Don't honor your traditions. But here are some options to make that even more of a rich experience for you and wildlife around you that you have to coexist with. Through that research, we documented jaguars that were thought to be extinct from this area for 30 years. By partnering with community members, collaborating and honoring that local knowledge that they share. But my true passion was to come back and really give back to Griffith Park, which is in the background there, because it gave me so much. And part of that was really proving to people that Griffith Park was more than just a place for filming, just a place for hiking and recreation, playing golf, going to a Greek theater concert. I wanted people to know that this is also an important urban oasis for wildlife, potentially. And I wanted people to respect it that way. And so I started using whatever skill set I had, which is using cameras again, to document whether or not Griffith Park was an island. Using these motion-activated cameras to document animals that needed more space than Griffith Park had to offer, like deer, coyotes, bobcats, that we knew existed in the park, to see if they're able to get in and out of the park to get the resources that they needed. And we got our answer. This photo is an example of that. This is a family of deer leaving Griffith Park, crossing over the 101 freeway, and proving that Griffith Park is more connected than we thought, which was exciting to see. But in February 2012, we got the ultimate proof of connectivity. One of my proudest moments, other than becoming a father, was finding this puma butt on my computer screen one day. I was in my apartment scrolling through grass photo after grass photo, because the wind triggers the grass to move in the wind, and it triggers your camera and sometimes wastes your batteries. I was like, oh, not again. Like, I didn't pull the grass out of the way enough. I thought I was just going to have grass throughout the whole camera cycle or roll. And instead, I had this huge surprise. At first, I thought it was a Great Dane. That's where my mind went to, because there was somebody that would walk their dog in front of my camera all the time. And it was about the same height, honestly. But obviously, then I saw the paws, I saw the tail, everything else, and it was obviously a puma. And I shared this photo and then immediately started looking through all the other cameras and found this one, which is actually the first photo taken of this individual that would get the name P22 just a few months later, or weeks later, excuse me. And this is over the Ford Theater. If you've ever been to a concert there, that's on the ridge top right above the theater. So if you ever go to a concert there, now you know where P22 was discovered. And it was an honor. It was like finding Bigfoot or La Chupacabra for the first time, because they're considered like a mountain lion making it all the way to Griffith Park is like this urban legend that people would talk about, spread rumors about, but nobody had any evidence. And if they did, it was their cat or their dog that they would send photos of. But finally, we had this undeniable proof. The Park Service, who have been studying our local mountain lions since the early 2000s, got this animal captured 3 weeks later. We showed them a good place to trap them in the LADWP property. And then they did what you call a workup by taking blood, taking health measurements, putting a GPS tracking device on its neck. And that blood really was able to kind of answer a really big question of where it came from. And they found out based on its blood that it was related to P1. The P stands for Puma, by the way. The number is in the order in which it was captured as part of this ongoing mountain lion study. And so P1 was the first mountain lion ever studied, a real good example of all the threats facing this population. It was one of the biggest mountain lions ever captured in the area, killed all its mates, killed all competitors, killed its own offspring in its lifetime. And so you can imagine why P22, when he reached adult age, about 2 years old, decided to leave. And he decided to have this really perilous journey crossing two major freeways that we all hate. The 405 freeway, a 10-lane freeway that is very dangerous and busy all the time, even late at night, and then going through fancy neighborhoods like Beverly Hills, Bel Air, Studio City, Hollywood, then having to cross another 10-lane barrier, the 101 freeway, to then get into Griffith Park. An incredible journey. This was the last barrier he had to cross, right there. And then that's the Ford Theater right there, and that's where he was first photographed. Then this photo kind of was a game changer, because this was a beautiful National Geographic photo that took about 14 months to take. And this photographer, Steve Winter, was really adamant to get this photo, to get this juxtaposition. And you probably understand why this is a juxtaposition, because this animal is a symbol of wildness, nature, in front of a symbol of urbanization, right? And it really sends a statement that, hey, we still have these animals struggling to survive. They're resilient enough to get through all these barriers and obstacles. And now it's up to us to decide whether or not we want to keep them here, because this population that P22 is linked to is on the verge of extinction. And without improvements to connectivity, they won't be here anymore. We won't be able to tell our future generations about mountain lions living in our Santa Monica Mountains. It would be just part of history books, which would be sad. He was also a really great symbol of coexistence. A lot of great research came out from the National Park Service about local mountain lions, including P22, and a lot of it showed that he, even though he was in the most urban and smallest territory ever documented for a mountain lion, he chose to avoid people at all costs as much as he could. This is a zoom in of Forest Lawn Cemetery, which is on the edge of Griffith Park. And even though there's all this area here, which has a lot of deer eating flowers and things like that, he chose to use this riparian corridor almost all the time because he just did not want to be seen and saw people as danger. And he didn't get habituated like sometimes other animals do, like coyotes, raccoons, etc., when they're getting fed or around too many people. So despite being surrounded by thousands of people every single day, he never changed his behavior and was basically mirroring the behavior of all mountain lions in more natural spaces. He also became an ambassador of a campaign to ban rat poison, an issue that's been around for a very long time, affecting predators of all types, from raptors to snakes to other predators, carnivores like bobcats. And because he got sick, this famous mountain lion that's been in the news and has this inspiring story of resilience, people really connected to that and said, hey, he got sick, we can't have this anymore. This is unacceptable. And so now there's 2 bans against rat poison in the state of California, and we have better protections here in the state of California than anywhere else in the country against rat poison. And I'm not saying it's all because of him. A lot of it was because of grassroots efforts, but definitely this photo helped a lot and talking about the impacts of it. And also the most physical, tangible impact legacy of P22 is being the poster child for a campaign to build what it will be the biggest wildlife crossing ever built, which was an idea, again, just like banning rat poison a long time ago, but there just wasn't that story to really motivate people to throw that money in there, especially significant amounts of money that was required to build something like this. And over 10 years, with his help, using his story, they raised $100 million and were able to break ground right before he passed away, and which was really great and wonderful to see. Obviously, he doesn't understand his impact, or didn't understand his impact, but just to know that he was around and alive at the same time they broke ground on this was quite an amazing experience to witness. And as his story gets told in so many different ways, different organizations, different voices just sharing it in a way that's relatable to their communities, just allows that story to spread and impact people of all backgrounds. Our museum, for instance, has an exhibit dedicated to him that was only supposed to be a 6-month kind of temporary thing, but people loved it so much and they love his story so much that it is still here to this day. For reference, this is my daughter in 2017 when the exhibit opened, and this is her earlier this year. So it's been an honor just to witness the impact of his story, and that's kind of the biggest part of his legacy that I'm most proud of, is how he's inspired people to look at their environment differently, whether they live in an industrial neighborhood or on the foothills of a local mountain range. They all respect wildlife more and see themselves as part of an ecosystem, thanks to his inspiring story. But at kind of the base of that story is a really relatable one about overcoming the odds, crossing borders, crossing barriers, that, as you can imagine, someone that has a background that is of a legacy coming from immigrants. For me personally, it's hit me in so many different ways. And it was emotional for me to be able to get these photos for 10 years and also bring my kids into that process. And my daughter being old enough to be kind of aware of the P22 era in Griffith Park. Going into Griffith Park at that time when he was alive felt a lot different. There was this sense of wonder if you were already aware that he was in the park. And it was very inspiring. And being able to see these trails a lot differently than I did as a kid. I didn't know what I was looking at. I didn't know a footprint in the mud from my boot. And I didn't know the difference between that and a bobcat track or a coyote track. And now my daughter can identify not only tracks, but scat, which is fancy word for animal poop, and even like is comfortable enough to go dissect it and figure out kind of what was this animal eating. Maybe that's a little extreme. I don't expect everybody to want to do that. But anyway, having that connection, it shouldn't be a privilege, right? It should be everybody's right, that basic awareness of your natural surroundings. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have to become a wildlife biologist in your career, but at least have a more respectful connection with nature so that we can have a healthier, more resilient ecosystem and community. As I mentioned, he has such an impact, his story being told in so many different ways, from documentaries, docuseries, news segments, a plushie, a marionette. That's my son enjoying the marionette there. A day dedicated to him in the city of Los Angeles, a week that kind of builds up to that day, multiple children's books. I can go on. A rap song. This is Warren Dixon. He has an amazing rap song dedicated to P22, and that is his way of sharing that story with the Watts community, or at least his immediate community in Watts. And indigenous communities are also sharing his story in different ways as well. So his passing, as you can imagine, was very impactful, and was even, it surprised me how impactful it was. He eventually died because he got old, basically, had a lot of health problems that kind of made him feel a little bit more desperate, had the need to go into neighborhoods to look for raccoons, et cetera. And they were kind of worried about him, and the CDFW and Park Service, and wanted to trap him anyway to get a health check. But before they could do that, he got hit by a car, got taken to the LA Zoo first, then the San Diego Zoo eventually to get a health assessment. Sadly, he had all these failing organs, past trauma from another vehicular collision, and then in addition to that vehicular collision that he went through, in addition to parasites, more poison back in his system again after he survived the initial exposure to poison and mange. But people really wanted to honor his legacy, and there are multiple spaces throughout LA and beyond that dedicated their physical space to that, and the museum exhibit was part of that. All these are Post-its, people kind of adding how they decide what P22 meant to them, or how they want to honor his legacy. And to see that kind of go all the way up to the ceilings of our exhibit because they ran out of space really kind of is just one example of many, in addition to all these murals. And we think of LA culture, a lot of us think of murals, graffiti art, and people like Kobe Bryant, Snoop Dogg, people like that are immortalized on these murals. So to have P22 be in the same kind of category as that really is amazing to think about, and gives me the chills still to this day. The indigenous community, when they learned of his passing, they wanted to make sure that his legacy was honored in a respectful way. They didn't want him just joining the rest of a collection in a museum. And they learned that I issued a permit to get him brought to the museum so that we can preserve his scientific legacy. Although I had intentions to make sure that the tribes had kind of some input on kind of what to do next, there's no way of them knowing that. So my lack of proactivity in engaging with the tribes took them by surprise, and naturally they were worried about him going to a museum. And they spoke up, they advocated for him. And it was a really unifying process for tribes, because a lot of these tribes sometimes aren't talking to each other as much or getting along all the time, but they all came together for P22. They all sat down with us and let us know that they want him buried just like a human relative, because that's what they saw him as. Not just a species, as a revered species that they have a connection to for a lot of different reasons. And one of those in the state of California is that they have these really sad parallels in their history of being persecuted by the state of California, and even having bounties put on them by our California governor at one point in time in the past. And so that connection, in addition to his journey crossing through different tribal territories, the Tataviam, the Chumash, and eventually getting into Tongva territory, was another connecting point. And mountain lions, that skull is there because mountain lions have been part of the LA landscape since the Ice Age. And they're one of the only cats to survive the Ice Age extinction here in the Los Angeles area. So that's kind of bringing me into another segue, right? Making sure that as we continue doing this conservation work, this research, especially in urban, highly densely populated communities, that the community is invited into the process. And that's why I eventually kind of went towards a career in community science. Because without the community, especially in really diverse, densely populated places like this, you're not going to get a comprehensive idea of what's out there, especially in urban areas that are filled with private property. And also, it's the right thing, it's the ethical thing to do, to not kind of create this barrier between people and science, people and nature exploration. We want everybody to feel welcome in these spaces. And having that background of not feeling that welcomeness early on in my career and in my childhood really made me very passionate about this field. And the definition that we've adopted generally for community science are projects in which the community, the public, partner with paid trained scientists to answer relevant or real-world questions about their surroundings. The scientific or the academic benefit of community science is to be able to immediately increase the scale of your work. Compared to a traditional lab that has just a few people, individuals to support that lab and that work and resources. If you have technology combined with crowdsourcing, you can really scale up the work that you do, the amount of area you can cover versus covering a certain neighborhood or park or region of LA. You can look at questions that answer, sorry, I should have had this closer, about the impacts of urbanization or the distribution changes of species and taxonomic groups throughout Southern California. And another benefit to research is that they are also able to give unprecedented access to private property. And that's especially important when you're trying to answer questions about biodiversity in urban areas. Without people giving you access to that private property by taking a photo with an app that documents what's there, what nature is there, you're only kind of surveying public parks and easily accessible areas that, yeah, give you a sense of what's there, but not a true sense of what's deep within LA's urban core. To do that in a really productive way, in a way that's equitable, you have to honor the background and the lived experience of people that are from these communities, have backgrounds in social justice, activism, have not just entomology degrees or ecology degrees like myself, but have local experience and also a diversity of experience, because you never know what's going to allow us to connect with a community, what's going to make us relevant to them. And if people have this authentic connection to communities and engaging with communities, then not only is that community engagement going to be more long-lasting and sustainable, but the amount of research questions we're able to offer and ask and answer is going to expand alongside that. And so this is our team. And we wouldn't be in the place that we are as far as answering the questions that we do, having the community relationships that we do without these individuals as part of that team. And making sure that we stay true to that philosophy of not only using community science to address scientific goals, but making sure that we make these experiences fun, preserve people's dignity along the way, create an environment of learning, and then also make sure that we foster community building. And part of that is making every aspect of what we do accessible and inclusive. And that includes our terminology. If you're familiar with this field, the traditional term, historic term for this is citizen science. Who's heard of citizen science as a term? Yeah, that was on my business card when I started at the museum. That was the title of our department. But kudos to our museum and community partners stepping up and letting us know that citizen science was not the most inclusive term, and really gave people a really negative reaction when they were invited to a citizen science program. A really good example that summarizes this is that a community partner of ours in Northeast LA held an event and had citizen science on it, and a little girl came up to the booth, the registration booth, was like, "Oh, I don't think I can participate in this event." And they're like, why? Because I'm not a citizen of this country. Those are unnecessary barriers, right? That we do not need. There's enough barriers in between people and getting into the sciences, the museum field, and similar academic fields. We don't need any more. And yes, kind of our voices were heard. We had impacts with our colleagues, and they also slowly changed their names and their terminology as well. But some of our colleagues were resistant. They needed data. They needed significant results or relationships. They needed statistics. And so we did that. And we wrote 2 academic peer-reviewed publications on this, proving that most people do not want to use citizen science, prefer some other term, not necessarily community science, but the consensus is dropping that term. It doesn't hurt anybody but academic researchers that want to retain it so that they feel like their research can be more publishable by using this more commonly used term, citizen science. So anyway, a little bit of history there. So our approach to community science has increasingly been more focused on community engagement. Not only kind of diversifying the audiences that we're able to engage with, but doing it in a really authentic way and doing it at a very early and proactive stage, early stage and proactive way. And it also means going at the speed of trust. Speed of trust is not an easy thing to do if you work at an academic institution. Usually you work on the pace of a grant timeline, an exhibit kind of timeline, but we had to push back, and that's not always easy to do, or having those uncomfortable conversations. And allowed us to move from just contributory research, which is important, which has a role in the research field, in the community science field, which is where people just collect data or do one aspect of community science, and basically the relationship ends there. If you expand the level of participation, the collaborative, you're actually listening to feedback on that participation, and you change the ways that you design your work or pursue that research. And then if you go from there, there's co-created, where from the very beginning, you're working with that community or community partner on the design of the project or how you're going to execute that research. And we work at multiple scales as a program. The global scale, and a good example of that is the City Nature Challenge, where we provide resources to communities all over the world to engage with the communities on their own terms. So we give them the resources that they ask for from us as organizers of this so that they can organize community science events, habitat surveys within their cities. And it's been very successful. It started off as a competition between LA and San Francisco, and now in its 10th year, we're getting up in the millions as far as observations and thousands of people participating. Last year, we really kind of separated the impacts at a global scale. As you can see, the numbers increased even more from 2023. And then also in the state of California, seeing the impacts on biodiversity documentation there. And we expect in 2025, the 10-year anniversary of this, to go even bigger, with 800 cities participating throughout the world, 3 million plus observations expected, and over 100,000 participants participating in this. And if you want to participate, it's easy. Just download the iNaturalist app and start just documenting wildlife, nature. And it has AI built into it, so you don't even have to know what you're looking at. Just photograph it, submit it, and people will identify it for you. So it's a great learning experience as well. We also work at the regional scale, where, like I showed you, we work on projects at Southern California, at the Southern California level, and looking at the impacts of species introduction through the agricultural trade or pet trade, and looking at the impacts of that on native wildlife. And so that it's impactful from that level, and a really great way to track those changes. And also an opportunity to look for native snails and slugs, or native squirrels that are blinking out here in LA, and seeing where they remain, where are those strongholds. But to do this in a inclusive way, you have to, again, step back and have community listening sessions. That's something that we weren't practicing early on in our department's kind of history, but it's really paid off at really building these authentic partnerships. And we also now are able to work at the local scale and have these more deeper relationships, more sustained impacts, and also get into the environmental justice space, which is not just a feather to put on your hat, but an opportunity to have a deeper impact on it with the community and allow them to be able to either not even just co-create a research project, but lead a research project. Those are called community-led projects, and that's the trajectory we're hoping to continue on, is eventually getting there so that the community has enough trust in us to approach us to say, hey, we have this question that we think you have expertise in, and can you help us out in this kind of way where we're taking the back seat, which is a great place to be. And we have examples of that. We have a project that's really looking at how we can use biodiversity documentation to track the impacts of development of a plot of land in Northeast LA that is under threat of dumping and also off-road vehicle use. And so we're using biodiversity data collection, the community is actually, to create these programs that are building community around this issue, but also documenting things like rare snails that they didn't know they had on the property to be able to advocate for their land on their own. We also have put bat detectors in the same region and documented bats that are rare in the LA area, and they can use that as another way to advocate for that protection of that land if these management agencies are only protecting land based on biodiversity potential or presence. Prospering Backyards is a co-created project where we are actually looking at the impacts of lead in a Southeast LA community and trying out through community science the use of a mineral called zeolite to actually neutralize the lead in people's soil. So they don't have to wait for the county to intervene and remediate the situation in their yards. They can actually, hopefully, eventually use this really affordable and accessible mineral to take care of that issue themselves, to make a safer space for their families. And then the last one I wanted to show you here is a partnership we have with the only indigenous school in LA called Anahuakalmakak, and it's also in Northeast LA, right next to Elephant Hill. And high school students are helping monitor this newly acquired land back that they got called Yana Village, named after Chief Yana Rocha of the Gabrielina Shoshone Nation. And they are managing this land alongside the Gabrielina Shoshone Nation and not only making sure that they're monitoring for biodiversity and making sure they're understanding the needs of that land from that perspective, but they're also making sure that they are honoring the cultural value of that land and able to continue those traditional practices. And now I'm going to get into, let's see where I'm at. Yeah. Get into the bat research. And this is where I'm going to end my presentation, is talking about this project as kind of this way to summarize all these intersections that I have between community engagement, urban mammal research, and then also looking ahead into what's next in community science, in community engagement, in equitable kind of engagement with communities in the sciences. So some background with my connection to bats. I talked about carnivores, which are kind of on the other side of the spectrum, right, as far as size. But I got into bats because I was working for the Forest Service and learned about a technology where you can use microphones, ultrasonic microphones, to monitor bat activity, because each type of bat has a unique echolocation pattern, frequency, all these characteristics that allow you to differentiate that bat from another bat that's also flying over the same area and speaking around that microphone. And so I was like, hey, this is a really portable device, just like a camera trap. Let me see if this could work in an urban environment, just like I threw a camera in Griffith Park and biologists thought I was crazy and my colleagues were crazy, I'm going to do the same in Griffith Park and put a bat detector out there, and then eventually go even deeper into LA's urban core if I have success with that. Through that initial pilot in Griffith Park, we documented a bat that we now all know that is still in LA. But at the time, the Western Bat Working Group assumed that within the LA basin, within the urban core of LA, they thought it was extirpated from that area. And then we got this documentation in Griffith Park. It's like, hey, it's still here. It's at least right here on the edge, which was exciting. It felt like kind of like that P-22 moment all over again. And then when I moved to the museum, I continued this research, putting it in our museum, which is in South LA, if you're not familiar with where it is, in our gardens, and then got 5 species of bats there. One of which is a species of special concern, the red bat. That's a migratory species, only likes to roost in foliage, but yet had multiple visits to our nature gardens in the middle of South LA. Another inspiring moment. Then I started monitoring the LA River with the support of the Nature Conservancy, found species there in the middle of the LA River. Then I had this really random moment at a USC football game with my family, and because I'm the bat nerd that I am, I had a bat detector in my pocket at a football game, and my brother who was with me was like, oh, there's bats hunting moths around the stadium lights. And I was like, what, really? I was like, okay, I'm going to put my bat detector on my phone and block these people's view behind me. This was not halftime. This is the middle of a game. And started listening for bats and like confirming that those are Mexican free-tailed bats, the most common bat in LA, being flying over that space in the middle of a football game. So I was like, hey, if I can find it in the middle of a football game, what else is out there? I'm sure they're probably even deeper within LA's urban core. And then also did some background research. Okay, what's been done? And so I learned about all this great research done in the Baldwin Hills that I was helping with as well, in Griffith Park a little bit, the Santa Monica Mountains, the San Gabriel Mountains, Catalina Island, a lot of great stuff that had been done, but again, not quite in the urban core. So kind of getting a snapshot of what's generally in the LA area, but not quite answering the question, what's surviving and even thriving potentially in the LA neighborhoods? And so a great artist did this infographic for me, kind of a reminder of what the process says. You put a microphone out in someone's neighborhood. This bat is hunting or doing whatever out in the night landscape, is echolocating to find a moth, to navigate in the darkness. And that echolocation that it uses basically to see at night is translated into this species-specific echolocation that scientists can use to document, okay, what animals are here and which ones aren't in this neighborhood. And it wouldn't have been possible without partnering with community members that offered their homes. And not only offered their homes, but offered their homes for a year. Something that also was seemingly missing from the data that I was looking at was that a lot of these projects that were done, even in San Gabriel's and Santa Monica's, were seasonal or short-term. And so not really giving you kind of the comprehensive view of what's going on a seasonal basis if you're potentially missing certain species that might have used that space, but just not when you're monitoring. So we got over 70 plus sites monitored over a few years, thanks to some funding from Disney Conservation Fund. And this heat map shows you the bigger the circle, the more activity at that spot, and then the color references how many species were at that spot. So it can obviously range, and within blocks from each other, there was some dramatic differences. If you're like at an urban oasis like Magic Johnson Park or a place like Echo Park Lake, places like that, those act as little oases because they have water, they have insect activity, especially in the summertime. They have these really spikes in activity, and a lot of them have tree canopy cover as well. And so even in blocks away at a local school or at a local house, the activity would drop dramatically. So to see that was really interesting. Through this work over the years, I'll go a little bit faster now, sorry, we got 14 species documented, these really adorable cotton balls with wings. And I love these profile shots because it doesn't make them seem as scary. Yeah, maybe they look a little weird. Maybe some of them look like hyenas or mice or whatever you want to call them. But I think they're adorable, and I think a lot of people agree with that. And not necessarily making you want to have a hug with a bat, but maybe at least respect them or want to tolerate them, which is basically a really good goal to have. And of those 14, 5 of them were species of special concern in the state of California. This is within LA's urban core. And with that kind of year-long kind of sustained research projects, we're able to kind of see seasonal or annual activity, which some of it was stuff that we expected. Mexican free-tailed bats were here year-round, had resident populations. Other ones that were strictly migratory, you saw the spikes when you expected to see them during the summer, time or spring, time like that, periods like that, excuse me. And then others kind of surprised us. They were more active in the winter or other times that we thought they would be somewhere else. Or they're active in 2 times of the year and nothing in between. And so what we learned kind of generally so far is that Mexican free-tailed bats are everywhere. They're resilient because of their bold behavior. They're larger size relatively to other bats. They eat a lot of different insects. They're more tolerant of urban dangers like noise pollution, light pollution than other bats are. Not totally immune to them, but more tolerant. Hoary bats, just like the red bat, member of a genus that only roosts in foliage, is pretty migratory. We thought it wouldn't be very common, and it's been extremely common throughout the LA area, which is exciting to see, and seeing that resilience. On the other side of things is the UMOPS, which is the Western Mastiff bat, the biggest bat in North America, a wingspan of almost 2 feet wide, and something that we should take pride in, just like we take pride in our mountain lions, it being here. But it's very rare. Another one is the big brown bat. We expected to have more of them because in other places they are adapted to urban spaces, but in LA they're almost vanished from the LA basin except for a few sites, which is alarming. But we're glad to see these trends so that we can potentially do something about it. And other researchers like Joe Carpenter and Joey Curdy and Dr. Blakey here are doing really great work to move that research along. Roost counts are something that we've also expanded on based on kind of feedback we got from local community members on what they want and how they want to engage with bat research. So some of them were like, yeah, it's great to know that bats are in my neighborhood with these acoustic devices and see these beautiful sonograms, but I also want to show my kid a bat. I want them to experience active field research. And so we expanded to doing that work and also going deeper into these relationships with these community members. And they're not just hosts for these detectors. They wanted us to talk to their school, talk to their local library, talk to the local neighborhood organization about bats and how to coexist with bats better. Creating opportunities for early career professionals to get immersed and get their foot in the door in this field. That was another request that we had some funding for a short amount of time to respond to, and hopefully we'll get some more soon. We had a summer internship, and it was a great stepping stone for those individuals that participated in that. And we surveyed them again, over and over again. We have to have this growth mindset so that we feel, oh yeah, it's better than last year, so we're good. We're better than this other research program that does the same thing, so we're good. No, we're not good until everybody feels welcome. And we're never going to know that for sure, so why not keep learning from the community and engaging them in ways that are more equitable and inclusive? Because there's no cost to it. There's no cost in the science, there's no cost in the research, and I'd argue against people that say if we put too much focus in community engagement, the science suffers. That's absolutely not true. You actually uplift the science and increase the amount of questions you're able to answer if you have deeper relationships with communities built on trust. And through that work, we're able to kind of understand this is other questions, other issues facing our local bats, and these are inspired by, yes, our kind of knowledge and questions as scientists who are knowledgeable of local bat ecology, but also these are the same questions that our community are asking us at public presentations, at tabling events, on formal surveys. And so seeing those align is really kind of where you want to be. And so with the bat roost counts, we're able to kind of see answer questions about where do they hide during the day? Are they kind of staying there year-round? Are they hibernating? Are they vulnerable to white nose syndrome, which is affecting hibernating bats mostly, but a lot of bats, and moving its way west, or moved its way west. It's here. And also being able to see, okay, how can we use this data to impact what we know about bats at the North America scale, and help other projects kind of learn more about patterns and fill in some puzzle pieces. We've engaged with hundreds of participants, monitored about 11 roosts, and counted thousands and thousands of bats with the support of the community. We wouldn't be able to have this effort without the community partnering with us year after year. We're also now expanding, this is what's next. We're expanding our work to look at guano, looking at what bats are eating so that we can answer another question, which is, how can I help bats? How can I help bats? I'm sure a lot of people who are at bat programs get that question a lot, or hear that question a lot, or ask that question a lot. And a lot of people go straight to bat boxes, right? But the truth of the matter is we want to create more awareness about bats. That's one thing. The other thing is we want to create more native habitat for these bats, for their prey species, more foraging habitat for these animals. Like all other animals, they need more habitat preservation, habitat fragmentation. Although they can fly, unlike a mountain lion, still impacts them. Those freeways are also a barrier to them. So knowing what they're eating is the first step, right? So you can look at using environmental DNA what their diet is, and so then you can match those insects with host plants, and then actually have a catalog, a list of plant palette recommendations for people wanting to have a really direct impact on bats in addition to other species within urban neighborhoods. So that's kind of where we want to go with that. Also want to give a shout out to the intersection of art and science. That has been a huge way for us to expand our audience, to make people feel welcome in these research spaces, people contributing water bottle sticker art, signage art, infographic art, and making sure we honor them with compensation or whatever kind of thank you that they value. And so one of my interns is actually also an artist and has continued to make bat art ever since kind of working for us and being introduced to bats. Shout out to Bat Boy. These are two things that are happening right now. This movie is circulating, making its rounds at film festivals, and eventually will be accessible to everybody to watch. And a really inspiring story about human connection to nature, human connection to bats, and also issues facing urban bats, and really done in a beautiful, relatable way. And also, just like the P-22 stories, kind of a story of resilience and overcoming the odds. This is an exhibit in Northeast LA that is dedicated to bats, inspired by all the urban bat research that's being done in LA, and now there's an exhibit, a temporary exhibit dedicated to it, talking about the connection people have to bats, and what home means to a bat, what home means to people, and how there's kind of overlapping themes there. Oops, sorry. And if you're not really convinced that bats are everywhere, oh no, tell me that's gonna happen, no. I had a cool video. Oh, I should have tested that. Oh, let's see. There we go. If you're not convinced, that was a towaway sign. That is a towaway sign. And that's also a bat roost. So if you thought, oh, they only live under bridges, they only live in trees, there's so many places where they are just making it work. And I think a lot of us can relate to that. There's one peeking out. It's really cute, so I didn't want to miss that. There we go. And then also making sure that we have the next generation covered. We have Outdoor Equity Grant where we're bringing youth, teens that are kind of looking at kind of what's next for them as they pursue college or the next step in their lives. They are introduced to the museum field. They're introduced to community science, science communication, and understand kind of what the opportunities are there. And not necessarily expecting all these individuals to be scientists, but be ambassadors for nature, be ambassadors for wildlife, conservation, and also feel more welcome into these spaces that they have every right to be in, just like anybody else. And this is all where I'll end is, this is all for the next generation. This is one of our community scientists from Southgate. His name is Nico. Learned about bats, became really passionate about bats, started checking out every book in the library about bats, even did this little art piece on his driveway about bats. So anyway, that's where I want people to go. Thanks to all these partners here. And if there's time, I'm happy to answer questions, or a few questions, yeah.
Thank you so much, Miguel. The floor is open for any questions. Let's go ahead and get the one in the chat while Dr. Blakey heads back there.
All right, there's a question in the chat, and the question is, the San Fernando Valley contains many historically underserved and nature-poor areas. Are there any community projects currently targeting the area?
Yeah, that's a good question. One of the regions that I focused on with the Backyard Bat Survey, with the acoustic survey, was the San Fernando Valley. And a lot of community scientists, practitioners, or scientists usually pursue the data gaps, right? But what you also find if you do it in a really thoughtful way is that these data gaps also overlap with engagement gaps. And the San Fernando Valley, South LA, Southeast LA, there's all these pockets throughout LA where you see, yes, there's not a lot of data collected, but also what's the inspiration if we're not going to them, we're not connecting with them, we're not being proactive about saying, hey, this is for you, this field is for you, nature's for you. And there's some great organizations like Pacoima Beautiful that are active in the community, that are engaging the community around nature, exposing them to natural resources, bringing them to the museum. But yeah, we could do more. But engaging with families and schools are in that area was a step I took, but hopefully we can continue to foster that relationship and expand it. So yeah, thank you.
I had a question. I actually just want to know, do you leave the trackers on them like that, or do you remove it afterwards? Because it looks super uncomfortable, and they also grow, gain weight. How do you adjust the collar?
Yeah, so when they're at an age where they're still growing, they have these more expandable collars if they're like juveniles. P22 was 2 years old or 2.5 years old when he was captured, which is basically adult age. And so at that point, they're basically growing. But even with that, you still leave a little space under the collar for a little bit of wiggle room. But yeah, I see it. Like, it is bulky. I'm sure, like, at first when they get it, they're not thrilled with the idea, but they're able to do a lot of things. They're able to hunt, and do all the things, actually. Hunt, mate, travel, all that type of stuff without any deterrence. The battery, though, that's on the bottom, that's the most bulkiest part, lasts 2 years, to your earlier question. And that allows the Park Service the opportunity to not have to capture them every few weeks or every month, and let him be or let her be for at least 2 years before they have to capture it again and replace that collar, replace the battery, et cetera. So yeah, that's the cycle. And it's invaluable data. Without this data, they wouldn't know that that wildlife crossing was the best place to invest in a wildlife crossing. $100 million has to go to one specific spot. You want to make sure it counts. And all those GPS points that piled up on both sides of the freeway were there and more than anywhere else at the Liberty Canyon exit. Without that collar data, they would have been just throwing that crossing in a random spot that might have been less effective. So anyway, lots of value to it, but yeah, I understand your concern.
Hi, quick question about maybe you and your community leading, I guess, recovery or repair for garden space or urban landscape for the Eaton and the Palisade fire?
Yeah, that's a good question. We had a meeting with the state recently about the role of community science. And I think right now, I meant to say this earlier, is that community science might be extremely, extremely valuable for the next 4 years. As people that are traditionally in these spaces, monitoring recovery efforts, doing restoration, repairing trails, monitoring wildlife and the impacts of fire, they're all out of jobs. I mean, a lot of them are out of jobs right now. And that's really sad. But this is also an opportunity for us as community members to step up. And there are projects by the California Native Plant Society. I think it's called Fire Watchers. I might be wrong about that. But anyway, there's these ongoing projects on iNaturalist where people can go out to these spaces, and there's very specific recommendations how to do this in a respectful way, a safe way that's not going to do even more damage to the habitat. So please follow that if you decide to do that, so that people can document environmental change and monitoring efforts. And also organizations like Arroyo Foothills Conservancy are doing great work trying to bring back this habitat and using that camera data that they had that survived the fires to understand how animals responded in the moment and how they're going to continue to recover.
Miguel, it's 11:07. Did you want to take one more question?
Sure, yeah.
Okay, so from the last question about the trackers, you know how they have that thing on their neck? Well, have you guys considered using like RFID chips to track them? And if so, what kind of downsides do RFID chips have to track them instead of using those collars?
Yeah, I'm not really familiar with that technology, but I know that certain technology that they've considered that are smaller don't have as long of a battery life. And also some of the problems with those devices is that these animals are very shy, elusive animals that are always deep undercover. And if it requires solar charging or basically a direct kind of exposure to the open sky so that to get a good signal, then that's going to be inhibited and not very possible if it's a really, has that GPS tracker that's built in within that chip is not strong enough. And those really high-powered batteries that are associated with those big GPS tracking devices allow it that resilience and strong signal. Yeah, good question though. Yes.
Did you face any challenges pursuing science as an individual who has parents that were not from this country?
Yeah, that's a good question. And to clarify, yeah, my grandparents were not born here. My mom wasn't born here. But my mom did grow up in the United States, even though she was born somewhere else. But I think the only kind of obstacles that she faced and my family faced was just that lack of connection to research, to the sciences, and also not really having somebody that she trusted out there for me to kind of look up to, be mentored by. And I think there wasn't a Dr. Ortiz or Dr. Blakey when I was growing up. And so the inspiring kind of messaging and stories of people like Jane Goodall only go so far. So honestly, my biggest inspiration was my mother, was my grandfather, because of their stories of resilience and overcoming so many obstacles. Although they weren't within the nature space or environmental space, there are a lot of examples that they've been able to share throughout my life when I've been in a tough spot that really kind of gave me that energy, that will to get past it and overcome that imposter syndrome or other barriers that I've faced and overcome along the way. So thank you for that question, but I hope that more and more people see that connection to that community, the immigrant community and other communities that are underrepresented in the sciences and academic field as a superpower, like I said earlier, as something that sets them apart, gives them another level of empathy that their colleagues don't have, and allow them to make deeper connections. Because once we do that and have people more mindful of wildlife, we're also going to be better to each other. And I think that's a world that I want to live in, and I think a lot of people can relate to that. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Miguel, for joining us today. I'd like to invite all the students to please join us for lunch and form a line on the right-hand side here if you'd like to grab a sandwich. And thank you again, all of you, for joining us. Have a great rest of your day. Stay dry.